Ravenwood was a small, tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. It was the kind of place where children played outside until dark, and neighbors looked out for one another. But the peace of Ravenwood was shattered one summer evening when 10-year-old Sophie vanished without a trace. Sophie had been playing in the park just a few blocks from her home. When her mother Maria went to call her for dinner, she found only Sophie's bike lying in the grass. Panic set in, and soon the entire community was out searching for the little girl. As night fell, the police were called, and an official search began. Detective John Carter, a seasoned investigator, was assigned to the case. He quickly realized this was not a simple disappearance. Interviews with the townspeople revealed a series of strange incidents in the months leading up to Sophie's vanishing. Several children reported seeing a white van parked near the park, and a few had been approached by a man offering them candy. Despite the leads, days turned into weeks with no sign of Sophie. The community was on edge, and parents were fearful for their children's safety. Then a break in the case came when a local farmer found a small backpack in a remote part of his property. It was Sophie's. The area was immediately cordoned off, and a thorough search was conducted. Forensic evidence from the backpack and the surrounding area led Detective Carter to a suspect, a man named Victor Larson. Larson had a history of mental illness and a criminal record for minor offenses. He lived alone on the outskirts of town and drove a white van matching the description given by the children. Larson was brought in for questioning. He denied any involvement, but inconsistencies in his story and physical evidence linked him to Sophie's disappearance. The search of his property revealed a hidden basement where they found Sophie's clothing and personal items. However, Sophie herself was not there. Under intense interrogation, Larson finally confessed. He had taken Sophie, but claimed she had escaped. This led to a frantic search of the surrounding forests and abandoned buildings. Tragically, Sophie's body was found in a shallow grave near Larson's property. She had been dead for several days. The community of Ravenwood was devastated by the loss. Victor Larson was tried and convicted for the kidnapping and murder of Sophie. The case left a lasting scar on the town, but also brought the community closer together in their shared grief. In the affluent neighborhood of Westbridge, the sudden death of Robert Harris, a wealthy businessman, shocked the community. Robert had been found dead in his bed, and at first glance it appeared he had died of natural causes. However, the coroner's report indicated that he had been poisoned. Robert's wife, Elizabeth, was distraught, but Detective Lisa Martinez found her behavior suspicious. Elizabeth stood to inherit a vast fortune, and her demeanor seemed more calculated than grieving. Martinez began to dig deeper into the Harris family's life and finances. Elizabeth claimed she had no idea how her husband could have been poisoned. She suggested that Robert had been depressed and might have taken his own life. However, friends and colleagues painted a different picture of Robert as a happy, successful man with no signs of suicidal tendencies. The investigation took a turn when Martinez discovered that Elizabeth had been married twice before, and both of her previous husbands had also died under mysterious circumstances. Each death had been ruled an accident, but the pattern was too significant to ignore. Martinez found that both previous husbands had also left substantial life insurance policies to Elizabeth. She began to piece together a chilling pattern. Elizabeth, charming and attractive, would marry wealthy men, then orchestrate their deaths to collect their fortunes. With this new information, Martinez obtained a warrant to search the Harris home. In Elizabeth's private study, she found incriminating evidence, emails and notes detailing plans to poison Robert. The poison used was a rare substance, one Elizabeth had acquired through her connections in the pharmaceutical industry where she worked before marrying Robert. Elizabeth was arrested and charged with the murders of all 3 of her husbands. During the trial, her defense painted her as a misunderstood woman who had suffered great personal loss. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. She was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Elizabeth Harris, dubbed the Widowmaker by the media, fascinated the public and served as a grim reminder of how appearances can be deceiving. In the bustling city of Chicago, a string of mysterious deaths began to catch the attention of Detective Sarah Novak. The victims, all middle-aged men, appeared to have died from natural causes, but something about the cases didn't add up. They were all found in their homes, alone, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. Novak noticed a disturbing pattern. All the men had been part of a support group for recently divorced individuals. She decided to go undercover, joining the group to gather more information. There, she met various members, each with their own stories of heartbreak and recovery. One member, a woman named Laura Mitchell, stood out. Laura was charming and empathetic, always lending a shoulder to cry on. She'd been a member of the group for years and seemed to know everyone's secrets. Novak began to suspect Laura, but she needed concrete evidence. Novak's breakthrough came when she learned that Laura worked as a nurse at a local hospital. She had access to a variety of medications, including potent sedatives. Investigating further, Novak discovered that Laura had been married 3 times, and each of her husbands had died under suspicious circumstances, similar to the recent victims. Novak decided to confront Laura, carefully orchestrating a situation where she could catch her in the act. She invited Laura to her apartment under the guise of needing someone to talk to. Laura arrived, carrying a thermos of homemade tea. Novak pretended to drink it, but secretly poured it out when Laura wasn't looking. Shortly after, Novak pretended to feel drowsy and disoriented, giving Laura the impression that her plan was working. Laura began to confess, detailing how she had poisoned the men in the support group who had rejected her advances, viewing it as a way to save them from their misery. With the confession recorded and enough evidence to link Laura to the previous murders, Novak revealed her true identity and arrested Laura on the spot. Laura was tried and convicted of multiple counts of murder. The case became known as that of the silent killer, highlighting the dangers that can lurk behind a facade of kindness. In the early 1980s, the Seattle area was gripped by fear as a series of brutal murders targeted young women. The victims were mostly runaways and sex workers, and their bodies were found along the Green River. The media dubbed the perpetrator the Green River Killer, and the community was desperate for answers. Detective Tom Jensen was assigned to the case, leading a team of investigators in what would become one of the most extensive manhunts in U.S. history. The killer was methodical, leaving few clues and changing his methods frequently to avoid detection. Jensen and his team interviewed hundreds of witnesses, gathered countless pieces of evidence, and followed every lead, but the killer remained elusive. The investigation took a significant turn when a forensic scientist developed a new technique for DNA profiling. Samples collected from the crime scenes were re-examined using this technology, and a match was found. Gary Ridgway, a local truck painter with a history of minor offenses. Ridgway was brought in for questioning, and despite initially denying any involvement, the overwhelming DNA evidence and witness testimonies linking him to the victims forced his confession. Ridgway admitted to killing at least 49 women, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Throughout the investigation and trial, Ridgway showed little remorse for his actions. He claimed that he targeted vulnerable women because he believed no one would miss them. His cold, calculating nature shocked the public and left the families of the victims with a deep sense of loss and anger. Gary Ridgway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Green River murders highlighted the need for improved forensic techniques and better protection for vulnerable populations. Detective Jensen's relentless pursuit of justice brought some closure to the families, but the scars left by Ridgway's heinous crimes would never fully heal. These stories, based on true crime, illustrate the dark side of human nature and the relentless efforts of those who seek justice for the victims. They serve as a reminder that evil can lurk in unexpected places, and that vigilance and determination are essential in uncovering the truth. Do you enjoy spooky short stories? Consider subscribing. Until next time, friends, good night.